Hello, everyone, and welcome to another busy webinar. Today, we're going to talk about from messy to managed spring cleaning your website. It may not feel like it in Minnesota right now, but it is almost spring. We're on spring break. Everything's lovely and gorgeous, and I need to mute my video. And so delighted to have you all here with us. So welcome to From Messy to Manage, spring cleaning your website. We've got folks jumping on from our participants. So as folks are joining, I'll give you a little bit of detail about what we're doing today, and of course, who BusyWeb is. And most of the folks that I see on the webinar right now are fans of the show. So welcome and hello, and delighted to have you all with us. We do have a number of questions that we have cataloged from your registrations. So if you submitted a question as part of the registration process for today's busy webinar, we will be answering that in turn and in time today. So delighted to have you with us on that. But if a question pops up that you just need to get answered and that you want input on, maybe it's as part of something that comes up through the slides today, would love to have you ask that live during today's event. And you can do that using either the webinar chat or the Q&A tool. If you are posting or watching this live on our YouTube channel, you can also post live in the chat on the YouTube channel at busyweb or youtube.com/busyweb. And we will be keeping an eye on those questions there as well. Looks like folks are piling on, so welcome to everyone. And if you do have those questions, again, be sure to log those. Let's use the Q&A tool because then I can just log them and answer them in turn. And we'll get to our content now. So messy to managed. As we look at our websites, one of the things that BusyWeb has done in the past 27, oh my goodness, years, we are 6 months younger than Google as an organization. And so as we've looked at how the web has evolved, the real difference, certainly in the past 5 years and now in the past year and a half with the advent of AI, is that content has really exploded. And with lots more content comes lots more just mush. And a lot of folks aren't spending as much time as they really should curating that content and making sure that it actually makes sense from a usability and user experience perspective. So I'm going to give you a few tips and tricks. We're going to go into a few of the back office settings inside of HubSpot in particular, but these also appear and apply to any CMS, content management system. So as if you're doing things in WordPress, or if you're delivering your content through Wix or any other website builder, you can use these tips and tricks to help you build your biz. All right, so you might be wondering who the heck I am. Well, I am the president and founder of BusyWeb. We've been around, as I mentioned, since 1999 now. So we're at 27 years this month, where we've been helping businesses grow and generate leads based on relationships. So there's a lot of companies out there that focus on B2C or retail, and the retail and the Amazons of the world are very much about transactions and clicks and A/B testing to try and elicit some sort of a response and speed up the process of getting a click. B2B marketing is really about speeding up and enhancing and deepening relationships with people that matter to your business. And that's where we really focus. So as I'm talking today, just please keep that in mind, that the frame from which I'm talking about usability and cleaning up your website is from our intended audiences perspective, which is the folks that are looking to engage with people that aren't necessarily customers on first click, but are leads. And then those leads are warming themselves up by engaging with your content. And so you need to give them plenty of places to go and plenty of things to consider. And we should be helping our clients, our prospects, sell themselves on what we do by giving them lots of helpful information. But you don't need to elicit a final buy now. at every turn with B2B marketing. So that's where I'm coming from with this content today. And as we look at this, it really is pretty messy out there for what we're seeing, certainly in the past year and a half, now that people can generate content using ChatGPT or Gemini or Anthropic, Claude, or any of the other things that you can generate content with. Um, it's just getting full of clutter and junk. And certainly, if you've generated business over time as a B2B, maybe you don't focus on your website as closely and as constantly as a B2C or a retail oriented organization might. So, as you do, a lot of those old pages, those old events that you've published over the past, those blog posts that might not really apply anymore, they tend to get stale, and that can start helping or start hurting your overall site health. There's pictures and there's images, and sometimes CRMs or CMSs, content management systems, can let you build content that is a little bit janky. And by that, I mean maybe you imported large videos or images, or you had a homepage that has a beautiful tracking shot of the outside of your facility. And that's a heavy, like, big thing to download, especially over a 4G network on your phone. And more people than ever are experiencing websites from their mobile devices because we think of something, they think of your business, they might drive by your storefront or get a referral from someone in a conversation, maybe at a trade show, and they're going to fire up their phones right there, not go to their computers. So you need to make sure that you've got all of that content handy and helpful and trim things that don't matter. Also, there's a lot of easy stuff to pay attention to, like those dead ends, 404 errors. I have a house in our neighborhood or near our neighborhood. The address is 404, and I always giggle a little bit as a marketer because 404 means not found. And so if you're seeing 404 pages or links on your website, you can or you need to identify those and remove those links from your website, and also update your Google Business um, content, your search console, to disavow those things that are no longer there. And we already talked a little bit about excess weight. So if you have a WordPress website and you've got all kinds of plugins, half of which you don't use, that's not only a security risk, it's a complexity risk in that that's just extra stuff that might break your website in some point in the future. As WordPress or any CMS evolves, there are additional security concerns that you need to take advantage of or look at. And if you're not paying attention to those regularly, you're missing out. So as we look at these, it's really important for us to just keep that in mind. So I'm going to go into the back end of HubSpot for a moment. And again, if you have questions as they're popping up today, I'm keeping an eye on YouTube and of course in the Zoom webinar. If you want to post something in a question in the Q&A tool, that would be amazing because this is all about you and your time. So let's get into the back end of HubSpot so that you can see how some of this works. So as I'm looking for digital clutter, I want to look at all of the different pages inside of my website. So as you go into the content part of HubSpot, the Content Hub, you're literally looking at draft, published, and scheduled posts. There might be some archived content that you have out there that you really just don't need anymore. So look at those, review all of them, and analyze what you're getting out of each of those pages, posts, or certainly if it's a draft and you have no intention of actually publishing it, let's just remove that stuff, because even in a well-built CMS like HubSpot, if you have too much crap out there, that's just more stuff for the system to have to deal with. So making sure that you've got all of that in a analyzed and an optimized spot, removing things that don't make sense, and giving you as much clarity into your website as possible. It's important to keep that clean and identified, especially those old blog posts, because certainly if The blog has been posted for a long time. You might even be ranking for some of that content, but it doesn't relate to what you do anymore. Bad traffic is bad traffic. And even if it's traffic that you would love to have and that'd be nice to share in a marketing report to your bosses, if it's the wrong content that doesn't relate to what you do, it really shouldn't be out there. So updating and doing redirects to those pages that do make sense from that old content to the new is very helpful. This is what the Analyze tab looks like inside of the HubSpot CMS. And as you look at this, you can see how many views, in this case for this month, what we have in our website. So calls to action clicks, legacy rates, like how many conversions we've had, how many entrances and exits we've seen across our site, how many exits per page view. So out of anybody that visits our website, about 74% then leave after that, which is about average and on par for a marketing website. So generally, people go to our homepage, they check out the content and see, okay, is this company for me? And then if not, then they move somewhere else or they go on to the next content. Average time per page view, it's actually kind of interesting. This is generally pretty high for us. And a lot of our clients have a much slower or a much lower average time per page view because we have a lot of content on our website. And so it requires some reading. And so that's a good level of engagement or a good indicator of engagement. So what you want to look at are those high bounce rate pages, people that go to the page and leave. A lot of times that's indicative of someone that may have expected a specific kind of content or be looking for a specific answer in what they do or in what they're searching for. And if that page doesn't deliver on the promise or what they were expecting and they just leave, especially if they leave right away, that's a good indicator that maybe your content isn't delivering on what the search intent was. And so if people are going for an informational search intent or certainly a transactional or a commerce intent where they want to engage and they want to be able to raise their hand and say, please, someone contact me. And instead you give them a very wordy page that has a lot of information, or maybe it has a video that takes forever to load. If people are just leaving, that's a problem, right? And so you want to make sure that you've got that and you're thinking about it. So looking at your analysis, and you can see all of the different helpful reports right from the dashboard inside of content. And again, I've gone to my website inside of HubSpot and gone to content. And then I'm going to the overall page and looking at manage and analyze inside of these pages to see my details. And reviewing our attendees here, most of the folks that are attending are in HubSpot Content Hub. So you can view this for yourself and review those reports. As well, as you look through your content, there are a number of content tools to help you optimize and streamline your content. So what you want to do is go into the content guide, and there's a big orange button inside of that page where you can review the content tools, and it lets you review and take step by step forward momentum through identifying and cleaning up what your website can do for you. So taking ownership of your website, that means building generative content and help. Like I mentioned, you want to be extremely careful on AI generated content, but if you build your brand voice, at least what you generate on drafts will be much closer to the overall tone and feel of how you interact as a website. If you review BusyWeb's website versus our competitors, or certainly against our clients, which tend to be more industrial and or consultative in nature, we have a slightly cheekier tone with a lot of the things that we do. And so we liven it up just a little bit. And so depending on your intent and what your audience expects, sometimes that can be a good thing. Sometimes it can be a challenge. So if you have one of your writers on your website that tends to be super cheeky, but you're an accountant firm, that could be a bad thing, right? So it's important to look at that. So that's all preamble to what I want to talk through today, and that is the 4 pillars of a healthy website. Again, we're going to go through and we'll have examples of what these pillars can do and how to impact or look at what you can do with these pillars. But as we look through these, the four that I'd like to talk through today are SEO and discoverability, site speed, ease of use, and security. So these are all big things that we all need to pay attention to inside of our websites. Good news for any busy web clients, of course, we do all of these things as part of our ongoing marketing relationships and web building relationships with our clients. And HubSpot does most of these things in a pretty streamlined way. So it's pretty easy to do most of those things. But it still makes sense to take a human approach and look at this from an outside perspective as well. So as we look through first, SEO and discoverability, there's a number of things that you need to consider and review from an AI perspective. Going into your Google Search Console and looking at your HubSpot or your CMS of choice in the reporting, in looking for, and most importantly, dead links. So those 404 errors, that's going to be important to optimize, to remove, to go into Search Console and disavow things that you can't impact any other way. Duplicate content is a challenge a lot of times, but dead links are a bad thing. So you want to make sure that if you had linked to a partner's website or you had a event that you built and co-promoted through a blog post or a page on your website, maybe your event site, and that page is gone now because the event was a year ago or 5 years ago. I've seen huge delays in timing. You want to just remove those links, right? AI search engines have some ways to review that content, and you'll get devalued if there's a lot of just dead stuff on your website. And if you think about it, it's just like a relationship or a walking into a retail store. If the place is in disarray and there's all kinds of old moldy things on the countertop, you really aren't going to want to come back to that place and you might leave as quickly as possible, right? So that content and that old stuff is important to prune out on a regular basis. So content decay. If you've changed what you do, and you may have installed or added new products or services, and there are still old products or services that you don't really do anymore on your website, it makes sense to prune those out. And if you don't, you're going to see what we call keyword cannibalization. And that means that you've got a bunch of weak pages that are really kind of battling each other, and Google or OpenAI are going to not have enough information on how to prioritize one over the other because they're both kind of, is it that sad color of, dry erase marker that's sitting on the counter of the cluttered workspace, or a different sad color. So it's there, they won't know what to choose. So as you look at this inside of the search strategy tab inside of Content Hub, again, you go to the left in the search bar and you look at search strategy. It's a new thing that's available in Content Hub Pro and above. You can review all of the recommendations. What I love is there's an AEO or a robot search and LLM search tool, and an SEO tool. And so this is the AEO tool. In particular, I highlighted the recommendations section for our site because it's giving us content that it thinks we should consider bolstering. So these are the things that we know for the search intents and the content that we already have on our website, that these are some complementary things that would help generate more traffic. Again, one of the parts of spring cleaning a site is to add more good stuff instead of just removing all the bad. And so as you look at this, in particular, this one, publish a HubSpot admin and support services listicle for US teams, or creating a RevOps services listicle for mid-market US buyers, or create a product page for Hub admin and support managed services. And that gives you what you should be considering. The fun part inside of this is if you click on it, it'll actually help you generate a draft or an outline of that kind of content so that you can publish it and start ranking for those things. So very, very helpful. A lot of times, again, when you're spring cleaning, adding a new, adding a flower or a vase to the table can also help spruce things up. So getting that good content is incredibly helpful. And then inside of SEO, you want to focus on what your strategic topics are, what you're ranking for, and look at the things that aren't working. So as I'm looking for, either content that I know doesn't serve my intended audience. And inside of HubSpot, you can actually load up ICPs or personas and rank how useful your content is against those personas. And you can even develop content for those personas and build custom content on your pages so that if a engineer versus a C-suite comes to your website, you're giving them different content on the same page. So that's incredibly helpful. And again, it's putting on helpful blinders and letting people streamline their process to get to the content that matters most as quickly as possible. So inside of your analytics, you can see inside of here, you'll notice that there's Ask Breeze. This is an AI assistant that helps you look at your content and your SEO. So it says, how much traffic did we get from ChatGPT? What's our conversion rate from organic search versus AI? How do I ensure my brand products and content are recommended on AI search? All that is super helpful. I can look at and review my different impressions, my top performing pages. You want to look for what those common themes are on the content that's performing well. And I always like optimizing for things that are working instead of removing or trying to fix things that aren't. So the big wins and the quickest wins are doing more of what works. And so if you notice that a particular kind of blog just isn't working, or every time you try to load up a video or do a listicle or something like that, which is simply a list-based blog post, it just doesn't perform well. I wouldn't tinker with it too much to try to get it to work. I would focus first on what is working. That's that 80-20. So focus on the most important things that get you the traffic, and then you can start focusing on that 20%, maybe after you've had a little bit of time to take care of the big stuff. Okay, so as we look at this then, there are a number of different things to think about and to work through inside of your content. So I like running through this matrix as you're building your pages. So again, we go with what works most for the pages that aren't performing the way we expected, especially if they're essential to our organization. We want to ask the following questions. Is the content still relevant? Yes or no? Is it helpful or valuable for backlinks and traffic? And if it doesn't answer yes on either of those things, that's a good indication that that content might be worthy of a devalue. So removing that from your account or your pages. But if you're going to keep that content, you want to refresh and optimize it, updating your sources. 3 years is a pretty good refresh rate. Anything that's older than 3 years is really ancient in today's information world. So updating, reviewing, you don't have to scrap content and republish it. Sometimes just updating a bit of content and changing it, adding some content, and then resubmitting it is incredibly helpful. Or you can consolidate and redirect if you know that it doesn't have high value and help. One way to help bolster that and to add additional content is to use the content remix tool inside of HubSpot. And so again, there are remixing tools that you can use inside of any CRM or CMS. But inside of HubSpot in particular, inside of any blog post, inside of any piece of content, period, on your website, you can go into settings and choose remix content. And then you can see a number of options. So you can do an additional blog post, you can do social media posts and choose which kinds of social content you want to publish to. Maybe you have a very active Instagram following, or maybe you're B2B and most of your connections come from LinkedIn. You can publish to those pieces or those places right out of the Remix tool. And so publishing links and content to your audiences directly can be very helpful, and it will give you additional backlinks that are super helpful. Or maybe you need to actually drive content and make absolutely sure that eyeballs are getting in front of that content. That's where advertising comes in. With Google ads, with increasingly AI ads and things, with LinkedIn, you can drive content to the most important things on your website. A word about ads, though, you shouldn't be promoting an ad to a blog post that doesn't have an absolutely crystal clear call to action on it. Any money that I spend on advertising, I want to limit the potential outcomes to what I want, right? So I want there to be a very clear CTA button on my website inside of that first scroll, so that when I'm spending money on content and I'm getting in front of those people that I know are searching this important content right now, I want them just to get to what the next step is as quickly as possible. So that's when you're going to use advertising. Um, Tony asks, where's the remix section found for blogs? And I have that here. And so actually, I think if I go through, I can go into my content hub. And so if I'm in here along the side, I can go into, actually, I know I have a blog set up, or here's my remix. So yeah, actually, let me back up to a section. This is inside of an existing blog post of ours. If I go to file, or actually, yeah, if inside of the file menu, it goes into remix content. And so that's where you can see that remix information right there. And then when you go in, you're actually presented with a number of options. So inside of that, you'll see, I can generate and add an audio file, a form. I always click down and I go in, well, I want at least a couple of social posts. I want a ad perhaps, and I generally want an email. So this might be a marketing email that I send to a specific audience persona. And so anyone that's visited my website that fits my audience, from a particular section, then I want to connect with them. And so I could also just do kind of a general where I promote all of my content to a wider audience, drive conversions, expand content footprint, or brainstorm ideas. There's a number of these out here. I could even do a targeted content campaign, so I'm tracking against each individual thing. The nice part about campaigns in HubSpot is I can track and optimize and say, okay, well, this particular blog post generated these things, and that's super helpful. Tony also asks, is this the professional level needed for Remix? And yes, it is. So the optimized content, what you'll see inside of other versions, and if you have like starter inside of Content Hub, that's an incredible value, but it comes at the cost of a few of the automated items. So you can automate things inside of the pro versions, and that remixing content or doing some of the deeper campaign work is something that's only available in the pro levels and higher. So great questions, Tony. I should mark that those are answered live. And so I'm going to type answer live. So now we've got those. Great questions. And again, for everybody, keep them coming. I don't see any on the YouTube channel, but as we go through, would love to keep this rolling for us. So this is our remix content section. And so if you've remixed your content and you have a lot of items out there, the next thing that you want to do is optimize for speed. And that's really the second pillar for us. And inside of this, especially in some of the clunkier CMSs, so it's real easy to build content in WordPress, for example. That WordPress content is also really easy to publish things that you might not have intended. So you might have a beautiful photo that you found on your phone that you wanted to share, but that photo is 10 megapixels. Sometimes if you don't have the right limits on your publishing capabilities, you could publish something that's so huge that it grinds your entire website to a halt. So the trick that you want to look for, and you can see this inside of Google Search Console, is to look for your site page performance at about 2.5 seconds or less. If you're slower than that, especially if you're on a mobile device and it's taking more than 5 seconds, people are just going to leave. They'll think, oh, well, the site's broken, or, I have other things to do. And so they're going to be clicking elsewhere to get to your content. So the big things to look at and that you can impact are LCPs. That's the largest content full paint. What that means is if there's a lot of big pictures or if there's a heavy piece of code on your website, a lot of times in WordPress in particular, there are site builders like Elementor or WP Bakery. Basically, what those are is they're massive amounts of code that sit between the website content and the development of the content. And so that code needs to render. You can even see this, especially in Elementor pages, where there's a little timer when you visit a website, and it looks like it's actually kind of looks like a Rubik's cube that's like building itself. And nobody wants to watch that, right? Especially if you're on a mobile device or you're trying to get some content or trying to look for specific things. If your website is slow, you're losing traffic, you're losing impact, you're losing the ability to connect with people. And it's actually costing you in your search results because Google is as impatient as a human. And if it can't see something within 2.5 seconds, it'll start devaluing it or it'll outright skip that content and you won't rank at all. So if your website takes 5 seconds per page because it's on a clunky Elementor build, that's a problem because Google's not going to wait around for that content to even show up. FID, first input delay, 100 milliseconds or less. That's largely a result of your hosting. So if you're on a inexpensive host like a GoDaddy or a $10 a month website builder like Bluehost, where they just host hundreds or sometimes thousands of websites all on the same server, if that server's slow, or if someone else or some other website on that server is taking a ton of input or getting a lot of traffic, that slows down everything. So that FID is largely due to bad hosting. And then CLS, cumulative layout shift, that's where lazy load and things come in, where you can just basically build the website on the fly so it presents content and text in particular right away so that the search engine tools and the AI tools see it. And then you build all the pretty parts and add the candy to the interaction as you're building forward. So super helpful. Make sure, again, this is where you're going to want to remove bad plugins. If you have a search engine plugin or a tool that helps you build your website, and the expenses that it needs to load all of that extra code in order to generate any given page, that's tough. So you want to declutter and compress your content. So any plugins that you don't need, remove them. This is where you would also want to remove any pages that don't fit. Compressing your media, looking at that content. I mentioned lazy loading. That's just a setting inside of your site so that if you have a first page paint, and so you have like the first screen on your page, that generates right away, and then it loads the rest of the page as you scroll down so that it's not loading it all at once. It's like going through a garden hose, right? So that content, if you're trying to fill up a bucket, if you try to wait for that bucket to fill all the way up before you drink anything out of it, I don't know about you, but I was raised in the area where we just drank from the hose. Um, Inside of lazy loading, you can just start sipping right away instead of waiting for that entire bucket to fill, right? And then CDNs, or content delivery networks, that's things like Amazon's AWS, or any like premium hosting provider has content delivery networks where it's delivering that content across several servers, and whichever server's fastest, or it'll generate specific little pieces of content across individual pages, and it all loads to that content or to that user from everywhere that's available. So you're pulling things in from several streams, or you have several hoses filling up that bucket instead of just one. And then looking at eliminating friction. So pillar 3, sometimes your website is just confusing. And so you need to take some time and streamline the interactions that you see. So especially, one of the biggest killer things that I like doing, especially nowadays, is I will one ask a LLM like a ChatGPT or a Gemini, what's the point of this website page or what's the point of this blog? And if it doesn't match what I intended, then I need to think about what I need to change. Another thing I like to do is I'll just ask someone that has no input or that is ideally in my target audience and just say, what do you think? And so I'll give folks a link to a page or have them review a site. Um, the old adage is, ask your mom to look at things. And if she doesn't get it, then nobody's going to get it. But, you need to look for those things. So common dead things or common confusing things are orphan pages. A lot of times we'll use these as landing pages, but if people are getting to a specific page either through a search or from an ad campaign, and there's no way for them to get and review other content, that's kind of the balancing act of a landing page. You want to be very specific in giving people only what they need in order to get them to the next step, but they also need to be able to dig deeper if they're certainly in their informational section of their buyer's journey and they're just looking to generate more content or get ideas about what you do. Confusing navigation, it's really tough, especially in a mobile first world. If you have multiple levels of site navigation with flyouts, flyouts don't work from with thumbs, right? And so it's fine if you're on a computer and you can hover and it goes over and through, but also people don't have that much patience. And if they click on your nav on your services and they see 4 services, they're not going to hover over each of those to see what the flyouts on each of those services are. So just give them the top level content. Use those top level pages as consolidation pages and make them almost like, remember in the old Yahoo days where it was more like a directory? Your top level pages should give people easy next steps instead of forcing them to hunt and peck and try and just kind of navigate around in the hopes that they're going to find something. I say this all the time. Your website is not Where's Waldo. If people need to search or can't find things, or if it's tough, they're just going to move on. So pretty design, if it's clever, if it's fun, that's one thing. But if it's confusing, that's not good. So make sure that you're streamlining your buyer's path. And the way to do that is to look at your navigation, to identify what things are hitting, what things aren't making sense, and look for that top level. If I am your key audience and I need you right now, how can I decrease the amount of steps that it's going to take? And how can I keep it top of mind by speaking in their language? Having massive amounts of information on your About Us page or just putting every word possible on your home page so that nobody needs to click anywhere, that's the tyranny of too much choice. And so you get into analysis paralysis where you're like, I don't know what to even do here. And then you just leave, right? Orphan pages, again, we talked about this a little bit, but remove those. If they don't make any sense, if they're old landing pages and you don't have an ad campaign pointing to those anymore, just get rid of it. And then just audit your forms. Your forms should be, especially contact us forms or first input forms, should basically just ask for yes or no and your email address. You can ask them more in subsequent interactions, but asking too many questions, asking people to rank things or to choose A, B, C, D, or certainly to fill in the blank, there's always a need for a more info, fill in the blank at the bottom of any form. But if people don't want to fill in more information than just, I'm interested, talk to me, then you need to remove that. So asking them too many things, a fill in the blank form question feels like 10 normal A, B, or yes, no question forms. So make sure that you're streamlining that out. All right, finally, security. Focusing on having great security and that your website is clean, clear, and isn't going to damage your reputation or your input is incredibly important. Again, this is a ding on WordPress in particular, because people have plugins on their websites that are 5 years old, 10 years old sometimes. A lot of times those plugins haven't been updated in 4 or 5 years. There's just bad code in those. If you're doing naughty things, you can get blacklisted. And so if you've spammed too much, or if you've sent out too many emails that link directly back to your website, and if enough people list those or mark those emails as spam and they're coming from you. So if it's you at yourdomain.com, if enough people mark that as spam, you'll get blacklisted by internet service providers or ISPs. And certainly if you don't have HTTPS on your website, almost no one doesn't have secure websites on their websites now, but it's just common practice and necessary now. Google won't even review HTTP pages anymore. It only looks at HTTPS because you don't want the ability for people to see whatever you're typing into that website or the website visits or links that you're reviewing in plain text. And there are bad actors that do that stuff. So the checklist to have inside of here in order to make sure that your website is up to date is simply to update your plugins. If you're on HubSpot, you don't have to worry about any of this stuff. It's all automatically updated and it's connected. Um, we focus on our HubSpot for the most part for our clients because it's set it, forget it. It's inside of a walled garden and it's almost impossible to bring it down. So, and if it does, there's an easy one-step removal or backup. Speaking of backups, if you have certainly a WordPress website having some sort of a backup tool, that is one of those things where it tends to slow things down. So make sure that you're setting that backup to happen during off-peak times, like 2, 3 in the morning, but make sure that you're running those backups and that you're auditing those backups. And then again, focusing on premium hosting. You got to pay to play. And if you're doing a $5 a month or a $10 a month hosting platform where it's sharing your website on the same server with hundreds or thousands of other websites, it's going to be slow. All right, so what we like to talk about with inside of this is continuous improvement inside of this. So it's the difference between traditional websites and growth-driven design sites, which are just, it's a fancy word for we constantly update and improve the website as we go. So instead of set it and forget it, we're continuously improving the pages that matter most to our audience. Not to us, but to our audience. Cost, it takes a lot longer and it's a bigger build on a traditional website. Whereas if you launch with a launch pad in growth-driven design and then continuously update it, you get there faster and your content is always fresher because you're constantly updating that site. Regular websites can take 6 months, rapid launch on a launch pad, and you go live as soon as possible, and then you continually update the pages that matter most. The big takeaway is that you don't need to fry your entire website if it's not working the way you intended. Let's start just improving that website on a regular basis. You need to be in there about every day, or not every day, about every week, certainly, but at a minimum every month, going in and paring down things, looking for outdated plugins, grabbing content, certainly removing any dead links or 404s, and that's just important. And if you're not doing that on a regular basis, we'd love to talk. And then there's a continuous improvement cycle. We call this loop marketing, but you want to express your content and define your brand. And then you can use that to tailor your content to your audience and to make sure that you're reaching the right people with the right content. The stuff that's working, you're going to amplify. And then based on that input, that feedback, and some AI input, you're going to look for those blind spots or ways to increase the resolution or utility of that content, and you're going to evolve. So that's what I have for now, and I did promise that we're going to get to our questions. If you have additional questions, please do log those here, either on YouTube or inside of the Q&A tool inside of the Zoom webinar. And again, as a reminder for everyone, because that's always a question that people ask, the recording of this is going to be available on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/busyweb. All right, so here we go. Questions for small businesses with limited budgets. What are the top quick wins to clean up and modernize a website so it feels current and professional? I'd say your homepage and your About Us page are the two most important web pages for SEO and for usability. So people are also going to want to see the main pages, your services, if you're a service-based business, your products, if you sell products. They're going to want to contact us, but think about those main things that everyone needs to review. Those are the pages to clean up first. And the best way to do that is simply to look at what are those high impact pages. Look at your SEO results, look at your Google Analytics. What are the top viewed pages on your website? Focus on those. And then the best thing and the easiest thing to do inside of that from a removing expense part is just removing stuff that you don't need. Clean, clear content that's not cluttered and full of junk is way, way, way better. It's way prettier and it's more user-friendly than too much information. So start by paring back the content that you really don't need. And you can have sub pages on your website that are deeper and that are going to show up in search engines and rankings and maybe promoted in social posts. But that's how you get there. And so that's the answer to the first question. Again, keep posting your questions. I'd love to answer more for you. I'm looking to learn more strategy about content cleanup. Again, going through the content cleanup phase, you just need to set time in your calendar to look at content that's stale, look at those 404s, look at the stuff that hasn't been viewed or visited in a long time, that stuff that's over 3 years old should be reviewed and refreshed. And so looking at that is really important. How often should you review and clean up links? Do I need to review my alt text and any images attribution if using sourced images? Absolutely. You need to be reviewing that. This is where some of the AI tools can come in handy. Google has a bunch of tools inside of their Gemini connections inside of Search Console and Google Analytics now. Look for that little spark, it looks like a spark. It's like a four-sided thing, almost looks like a top that you would spin. You can literally ask that for what are my bad pages or text. Anything that doesn't have alt text, any image that doesn't have alt text is a miss, and that alt text needs to refer to the point of the post. So if it's a picture of a person shaking someone's hand, that's not a great alt text. Picture of person shaking someone's hand doesn't mean anything to the audience. Instead, your alt text should say what the point or what you're trying to get that person to do. So, we are the premier provider for X, Y, or Z, or a person importing or experiencing our product and service. Not in those exact words, of course, because you want to insert your actual content, but that's what you want to do. And then links. The link text can have alts on it too, but in general, the easiest way to have a usable and highly SEO'd optimized link is to make sure that the text of that link reviews and or mentions the point or what you're trying to get found for. So if it's XYZ service, the link should say XYZ service instead of click here, right? Um, Tony, thank you for all the great questions. He asks, is there such a thing in today's age as providing too much information? If I want to provide more in-depth technical details, what's the best way to provide it to people that want that level of information versus keeping things simple and straightforward for the ones that want to book time and have a conversation? That is a brilliant question. And generally, what you want to focus on is having your most important information up top inside of any given page or post, and let the content drive the links. So it's okay to have links to more information inside of your content that can go as deep as your clients need, as your customers need. I'm going to switch over for a second to additional pages on our website. And I have a site tree inside of here. These are all of the pages inside of the BusyWeb website. And you can literally add additional pages and content inside of that. And then as I look at my content inside of this is a upcoming blog post. So spoiler alert, this is a blog post that's coming up in or actually next week. So what we do inside of all of our posts is we have a brief overview. So high value, like information dense content up top so that people can review that. And then we get into Q&A focused content where it's more detailed and that we give an encyclopedic overview of everything that we're covering inside of that post. And we do go deep. And really, an optimized blog post has a ton of information on it. So you want to make sure that you're listing that there. And thanks, Grammarly, for that. Would love if they would let me do that. I'm actually going to remove Grammarly now because that's silly. But we have all kinds of questions and answers, and this is relatively encyclopedic. I mean, this is over 1,000 words, and a general blog post should be at least 300. So this is 3 times longer than what a typical baseline for a blog post is. But since it's presented in helpful and useful content, and since it's giving us step-by-step content and you can click and browse further related content at several turns, that's the way to dig in and give you more content and depth without having it feel heavy. Great question, Tony, and thank you for that. And then, like, as I look inside of my growth driven design pages, for example, I've got encyclopedic information, but it goes right in. And right at the top, I have shortcuts. So I want to know about continuous improvement. It scrolls all the way down on that encyclopedic page and it gives me that helpful information. And I've got links to more information at several turns with a handy, very clear call to action right at the bottom. Great question. Thank you. Okay, so best practices and cadence for ongoing cleaning. What I like doing is, again, at least monthly, but certainly ideally, when you think about it, and whenever you publish a new post, you should be looking at the contents of an old post as well. So, like, if that's weekly for you, you should be cleaning something or updating something on that same cadence. I'm interested in learning anything that would help my website as I'm at a turning point and ready to do something radical. I know who this is, and that's awesome and hilarious. And I can't wait to work more with you on that structure. But in general, what you want to focus on is usability for your customers and your intended audiences. So the spring cleaning of your website should be, what does my actual best customer want? And at every turn of their buyer's journey. So when they're just identifying that they have a problem, how am I answering and helping them clarify what that problem is? When they've made the decision that they want to work with me, how can I make that as simple as possible for them to take the next step with a clear call to action? And how do I build the trust if they're comparing me versus my competition, or if they're just asking an AEO question, a Gemini search, or a ChatGPT search, and how do I give that to them? And then just building that content from there. And then finally, what's the most attractive site to have as a contractor? Purpose-built sites that directly relate to the needs of your users is what makes sense, especially for contractors. So if you're an asphalt contractor, having pages for commercial and residential, if you're doing that, but having pages for maintenance versus paving, and making sure that it's clear how to get to that next step. Again, thinking backward from who your ideal audience is. For an asphalt contractor, for example, their best audience is probably the corporate maintenance person or the buyer, because they're looking for, they happen to mention something, or the CEO's walking through the parking lot and said, there's weeds all over the place here. Somebody's got to do something about this. They call Mary in operations. Mary is your audience. So what do we need to answer for those people, and making sure that we have that content and thinking about that from that next level up, where you're looking and you're actually going, okay, if someone is typing into ChatGPT, like, how do I fix all the weeds in my parking lot? That I give enough content in my posts and pages so that AI is giving a good answer and then linking to my page because that's where they got that answer from. And that's the difference between traditional SEO now and AIO or AEO, in that it's more leveraged and they're actually looking to do something when they visit your website. All right, so we've gone through a ton today. I have a special offer for anyone that's attending today that's registered here. Go ahead and send me a note at hello@busyweb.com. We will give you a free site audit. We'll go through your Google Analytics, your Search Console, and we'll look at it from an AEO perspective to say, okay, what are those top level things that you're missing? And we'll give you a free, it's going to take us probably a 15-minute conversation to get all that out, but you'll have an overview report on how to spring clean up your website and to target your audiences better. And then we'd love to talk, and we'd love to see you next busy webinar on Wednesday, April 15th at 11 a.m., Making Sense of AI Search. I referenced a ton of this today, but GEO, AEO, I, there's all kinds of stuff that you need to know about getting found on LLM search, on robot search. And so we're going to talk deep about that next month. Looks like we've got all of our questions answered today. This is the last chance if you have additional questions inside of here. Thanks to everyone that did post questions. And if you have additional connections that you'd like, or if you'd like that review, just hit us up, either hello@busyweb.com or dave@busyweb.com. We'd love to chat about that. But otherwise, we'll see you next month at our Making Sense of AI Search webinar. And we very much value your time, your input, your attention. And I hope this helped you generate buzz without getting stung. Everybody have a fantastic time, and we'll see you soon. Thanks all.